Hey, folks, welcome back to the Vital Voices podcast. Today, we've got a fascinating guest on the show, Garg. Now, Dhaval's a guy with a pretty wild career path. He's been an engineer, a consultant, and an investment banker, and he's also a startup founder now, and he's diving headfirst into a SaaS for manufacturing play. And get this, we've known each other since he was a teenager. His family knows my family, so this one's a bit personal for me. So Dhaval is also a huge cricket fan and an F1. Played tennis back in high school and is one of the nicest guys I know. So Dhaval, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
Hey, Sulav. Thanks for having me. It's going well. It's going well. Thanks
Yeah,
for the
man.
nice intro.
Absolutely, dude. It's been a while. I guess been a couple months since we've seen each other, so I'm glad we can hop on here and chat a little bit. So let's start with this, dude. It's like we'll just kind of just jump into it real quick. You went to
Yeah,
IMSA, and so for people who don't know, that's like a school for geniuses. What was that like? Did you feel like a genius, or were you just trying to survive there?
yeah. I did not feel like a genius. So a bit of background. I moved to the States when I was 12, so right when my teen years were starting, from Indonesia, right, and completed my eighth grade and ninth grade. After that, I went to IMSA, which is a magnet school in Illinois, right. So it attracts students from all over the state of Illinois, urban, suburban, rural, across all socioeconomic paths, right? I did not feel like a genius. If anything, I felt the other way around. Felt that I had to work much, much harder in that school. But more importantly, I felt like an outsider when I came to the States. Felt like an outsider in eighth grade and ninth grade, which I completed in normal schools. And when I went to IMSA, which was a residential school, essentially all or most of the people at that school were the oddballs in their home district high school. And I actually felt at home. I felt at home over there more so than pretty much any other school I've been to, right? I found my own tribe. I found some of my best friends. So yeah, academically, I felt out of depths. I had worked much, much harder, but in terms of friends and in terms of social circles, it was a great place for me.
That's awesome, man. And I feel like, that's really important because it's like it's your formative years. So like kind of helps you build your confidence, build your friend circle, and really sets you up, I think, for success in college. So what kind of stuff were you into back then? Like, I mean, I know you. Like, were you the nerdy engineer guy? Were you the sporty tennis guy? Like, what was more you?
I was the nerdy science guy going into IMSA. And once I got to IMSA, I got out nerded and I was a normal person, slacker. And to give you an example, at my high school, I played tennis and I was part of the science club. I was part of the math club. We won the science. A partner of mine and we went to this competition for science club, came in third, right? And we felt pretty good about ourselves, where we had to build rockets and see which rocket would kind of stay in the air for the longest amount of time. I went to IMSA and I joined the chess club over there, right? And this guy challenged me to a game of chess. He said, I won't look at the board. I'm going to turn around and you move the pieces for me, and I'm just going to tell you I'm just going to dictate you my moves. You move the pieces for me. You can look at the board. I lost that game very, very quickly.
That's
That was a very
intense.
short. That was a very short game. So nerd in normal high school, a normal slacker at IMSA, and then
It's funny. Yeah, go
go
on.
ahead. And then I was into tennis. I was a bit into investing and learning about the financial markets at IMSA.
Somewhat nerdy guy in high school, pre IMSA, then the jock in IMSA. I like that. It's a good
Not the jock, the
transition.
slacker. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The jock slash slacker. No, I get what you're saying, man. So then, kind of tell me about IMSA. Like IMSA was the first time I'm assuming that you were away from friends, or not friends, from family, right? And I'm
Yeah,
assuming that's probably a relatively big transition, especially like I know, like from an ethnic family, it's like your family does a lot for you as an Indian, right?
yeah,
So like, what was that transition like? Are you happy you did it when you did it, or do you feel like it would have been better, potentially later in college?
yeah. It was. So once again, it was a residential school, right? And even though they had controls throughout the school that you had to be in the dormitory by a certain time, and the school would watch over you, it was actually a tremendous amount of freedom versus staying at home. I didn't have to go to bed by a certain time, right? Like if I went to bed at late in the night, no one was there to tell me, "Hey, go to bed." So it was a big transition in terms of the unstructured nature of time and the freedom I got. First time away from family, right? But the good news was my parents lived half an hour away, so my mom would pick me up every weekend. A lot of my friends didn't have that luxury, right? They would live hours away from home and get to go home once every several months. And yeah, it was a lot of freedom at once. I enjoyed it. I'm sure I abused it as well. Worked out in some ways I think I took advantage of the freedom I received at IMSA.
Well, let's jump into that. So it's like freedom. Obviously,
Yeah.
you're alluding to the fact that maybe you took advantage of it, maybe you didn't. So the stories that you're willing to talk about, tell
Yeah.
us some of the exciting adventures, youthful decision making that probably led to some good times, good memories. But when you look back on it, you kind of laugh at yourself and tell yourself, like, what the hell was I thinking?
Yeah. So not a whole lot. It isn't, when I'm alluding to the freedom, it's not that, we got in trouble or we did these things that we couldn't have otherwise. It was more around that the time around me was unstructured. Once I went to school, right, I was studying, but once I came back home, back to my dorm, everything, unless I was going for a practice or unless I was going to a club, all the time was unstructured. And I could do with that time what I wanted. If I wanted to go eat dinner, I could go to the cafeteria and have dinner. If I wanted to stay up till 3 a.m. in the morning playing video games, I could do that. If I wanted to be productive and actually do homework, at any hour of the day, I could do that, so it was, there was a lot of unstructured time. That was a big transition.
Yeah, I mean, but like, I know how kids are, man. I know how you are. We're good friends. It's
Yeah.
like, of course, you made certain good decisions. Did your homework always on time? I'm assuming. Of
Yep.
course.
Always.
Of course, right? But, with that freedom, as teenagers do, I'm sure you might not have made the best decisions at times. Plus, dude, a bunch of horny teenagers stuck in a place together. It's like, of course, certain things happened, certain decisions were made, good times were had. Like I
Yep.
said, you don't have to get into the details of all of it, but tell us some of the fun stories, some of the fun adventures. Because, like, let's be honest, man. Like, I think, especially as guys, speaking for myself, like, some of the best friends that I've made are because we've done some dumb shit together, right?
Yeah.
And some of the dumb shit wasn't that dumb. Some of it was. But regardless, it brought you together. You knew, like, these guys are loyal. We can trust each other. And honestly, you had some great times. So that now that we're older and we hang out, we talk about it. We're like, hey, remember that time, we did X, Y, and Z? And we all laugh. But it's great. It's like you build a lot of
Yeah.
good bonds. So like I said, tell us, maybe one
I'll,
thing. Doesn't have to be too graphic.
I'll tell you a story. So a bunch of my friends from IMSA, right? Good friends from my IMSA and we got together in college, right? We went to the same college. We got together and rented a house one of the years. And this is a stupid, pure stupid thing. And I look back upon it. It was a lot of fun when we did it. And when I think about it, it's probably not the smartest thing. We formed a 3-man water balloon launcher, which is, a slingshot, but you need 3 people to operate it. One person to hold one end of the slingshot, the other person to hold the other end of the slingshot, a third person to travel across and pull the slingshot by several feet, right? So,
Nice.
so not a few inches, but several feet. And we built that, and we got a lot of water balloons, and we hid in our apartment, and we launched the water balloons on unsuspecting passerbys and cars, right?
Jesus.
No one was hurt, no one was hit, which is good. We did hit a cop car that was traveling by,
Holy shit.
which was not the smartest move, but I don't think the cop realized where the balloon came from, and I'm sure he or she was fairly surprised and confused about it.
Yeah, like I said, solid decision-making skills by a bunch of youthful teenagers. Like, nothing wrong with that. That's some like Vietnam rugged warfare. Like,
Yeah.
you're getting into some cool shit, dude. I like that. All right,
Yeah.
but like, okay, let's speaking of UIC, or UIUC. So you went from IMSA to engineering at Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Like, was that a follow the path kind of decision, or did you actually love engineering?
It's a latter. Well, it's a bit of both, right? So most people from IMSA went into engineering, and then implicit or explicit, I think implicit, the expectation from my parents was that I go into engineering as well. Having
Makes
said
sense.
that, when I was at IMSA, I had this amazing opportunity to work with a Nobel laureate, Dr. Letterman. Dr. Letterman is a Nobel laureate, worked at Chicago, and he was actually the founder of the school. And he used to do projects with students, right? So I, along with a bunch of other students, had this opportunity to work with him. We were in the process of writing a book where every single student got to write a chapter within the book, and the chapter would be about a scientist that you admired or you want to learn more about, and then two, the science that they were pursuing, right? And unfortunately, the book never got published, right? We got very, very far, and we had pretty much all the chapters completed, but students graduated, and after that, the momentum just died, and we never got to publish the book. But the chapter I wrote was on a researcher named Eric Drexler, who's a futurist, and he is an evangelist for nanotechnology and nanorobots, right? Which is, he talked about his hypothesis that in the future, you would be able to build robots that would do mechanical stuff, right? Twist, pull, push, etc. But at the molecular scale, right? So these robots would be only a few molecules large. And if you've read the book Prey by Michael Crichton, it's something similar, right? And if you had and there are bacteria in nature, there are bacteria and cells in nature that are analogous to this, right? So there are cells that'll punch a hole through other cells mechanically, not chemically, right? I believe they're called flagella, right? Which is the rotor behind bacteria that rotates and it pushes the bacteria forward. And his thing was, once you can do that, you don't need chemical reactions to form molecules. You can put together molecules mechanically. Obviously, they should be able to be structured in that way, but you can structure the molecules that way, and then you can stack molecules on top of each other by using these robots. And so, in theory, what you should be able to do is, take a bunch of these nanobots and dump them in a mixture of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, right? The stuff from which organic material is built. And these bots would assemble the right molecules, assemble them in the right way, and could build a chair out of all these materials, right? A wooden chair, one piece wooden chair, for example. Or these bots, you could inject them into your bloodstream, and they would be able to cure you of any disease, whether that's plaque in your arteries, they could remove the plaque, or whether it's removing the cancer cells, right? So there are a lot of use cases for these bots. The science really fascinated me. It's something I want to pursue, something I wanted to become a researcher in. I want to go in nanotechnology. There was, and still isn't, any program that any school that offers a degree in nanotechnology, right? So I found the next best thing, which is material science. And in material science, you can work with materials at the micro and nano level, engineer those materials, understand their properties at that scale. I thought that could be a jumping point for me to get into nanotechnology. And University of Illinois, which is where I went, had one of the top material science programs. So to answer your question, the decision was both kind of an expectation from the school and parents, and then my desire to pursue a certain field.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. Yeah, Matsy I think was number one or U of I was number one for Matsy at the time, right?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
great opportunity. Plus, yeah, I don't know how many high school kids have the opportunity to work with the Nobel laureate. So that seems like a really interesting
Yeah,
opportunity.
no, it was absolutely fascinating, right? And Dr. Letterman would take one. He was a funny person, right?
Nice.
He was a very funny person. He would take science concepts and explain them to the average person or average student, right? Now when I look back upon that experience, he reminds me a bit of Feynman in that sense, right?
Nice.
Very
So
kind.
he simplifies complex problems so people kind of understand it and engage with it. Is that the thought?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's exactly it.
that's
And
awesome.
you're interested. The lay person becomes interested in learning more about science.
Yeah, man, it's interesting. You kind of position a relatively complex topic in the same way, I would say. Like let's talk about what you were just talking about because you actually kind of put me onto this. I remember a while ago you sent a paper my way where it was talking about landing on this side, one side of immortality or the other, right? And the paper alluded to the fact that, everything in human history has thus far, landed on the finite side of immortality, as in people, die after a prolonged period of time. But with the advent of nanotechnology replacing individual body parts one at a time, you can eventually get to a point where you're effectively able to live forever, potentially. But like, do you want to elaborate on that paper, like who wrote it? Because it was a very interesting piece.
Yeah. I actually do not remember that paper at all. But it
But
doesn't
also,
surprise me
but
that
like,
it's something I've said.
yeah, so effectively it was what it was alluding to, and I forget who wrote it. Effectively what it was saying is what you did, right? So like let's start taking the individual body components.
Yeah.
So you take red blood cells, right? So red blood cells to an extent bring oxygen to the various organs in your body. They're like, all right,
Yeah.
so like let's replace red blood cells with nanobots.
Yep.
So now what happens? You're not going to have red blood cells that are, potentially turning into cancerous cells or dying off.
Yeah.
And oxygen is still getting to each individual organ.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, now we have nanobots to replace your heart. So effectively what they were saying, they were going step by step and saying, if we started replacing all of these individual components with components that were not only replaceable, but we could replace them in a way where we could ensure their longevity, their proper functionality, and the fact that they couldn't turn into cancerous cells. One, as we did that, your life expectancy will increase.
Yeah.
And then two, if we then take that a step further and say all of the units or all of the system in our body effectively to an extent is there to prolong the life of our brain, right?
Yeah.
Bring it energy, bring it life, bring it sustenance. Well, if we slowly start to replace these things with nanobots, and then we even remove those nanobots and then bring individual components that can just directly interact with the brain and
Yeah.
slowly start to repair the brain and replace the brain's parts that are, organic and malfunctioning with, I guess, human-made components, you get to a point where that brain is going to be able to live forever or for a longer period of time. So then you get to land on the opposite side of immortality, meaning you can
Yeah.
effectively live for a very, very long time. But
Yeah.
like, I obviously didn't do a great job of explaining it. The paper went into depth, and it was quite interesting to understand like, how that works and how
Yeah.
even current technology is headed in that direction.
Yeah. So there's a concept that Eric Drexler talks about in his books, right? Which is what he says is any disease that we have is because either the right molecule is not in its place or the wrong molecule is where it's not supposed to be, right? So
Makes
if
sense.
we take arthritis, for example, right? It means that you don't have cartilage molecules, enough of them in the right place. Or osteoporosis, you don't have enough bone molecules in your body. Or if you take a genetic defect, you have the wrong gene or the wrong molecule, the wrong place, right? Or if you take dementia, right? Or I don't know about dementia, but if you take heart disease, right? Arteriosclerosis, I don't know how to pronounce that, but it means you have plaque, which is the wrong molecule in your arteries. And if that's the case, and even aging, right? The wrinkles and the sagging skin as you grow older, it means you don't have enough collagen that a younger self would have had. And if you take that view, what Drexler argued was if you can fix the problem at a molecular level, you essentially achieve immortality, right? You can solve aging because aging and disease is essentially wrong molecules in the wrong place or the lack of the right molecules, right? And if we can fix that, you've essentially achieved immortality. There is, it's the same thing as any sort of machine or a structure, right?
Yeah.
A house, for example, you can keep on replacing stuff within the house, including the structural elements. And if you keep doing that, the house can essentially last forever.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating point. It's like analogous too. It's like if you assume that your body is the structure and you're able to properly maintain it, yeah, like why wouldn't it? Just like, and to your point, it's like it is kind of funny. So you take a house, quickly will it fall apart if there isn't human maintenance versus
Yeah.
how quickly will it continue to be there, if it is maintained? It's quite fascinating. And I think the interesting thing about this topic as a whole is like, the other thing is it's like, I guess two tangents. Like so there was a piece saying that, from 1900 to 1999, that the level of technological advancement is the same from 2000 to 2014, and we keep on having it, right?
Yeah.
So, but I do think like with that, where we are like starting to see how quickly things are starting to advance, how AI is coming, how generative AI, like how fast it's improving. Like, are we gonna, reach, general intelligence AI soon? Who knows? But it might be sooner than we think. But with that, with the fact that we have like, I think it's the Google model that's starting to be able to like model how molecules interact, which used to take like years of physical work versus now like a model can do it maybe in hours. It's
Right.
like the level of advancement in healthcare is getting to a point where some of the sci-fi stuff we read about seems to be not just plausible, but somewhat in reach. So it's
Yeah.
kind of fascinating to see how it's being implemented in real time. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
And just to be clear, the question is, what are the thoughts on the pace of innovation
Yeah, what are
that
the
we're
thoughts
approaching,
on
right?
on pace of innovation and like when with respect to timing, like when do you think some of this stuff is likely to happen, and when do you think some of the other stuff is more like what time frame do you think we might be able to
Yeah.
achieve some of this?
Yeah. I have no idea when we achieve any of this, right? But I think it's sooner rather than later. It's sooner rather than later, right? So it actually recall the article that you're talking about now. It was written by this blogger whose name I will look up, but he writes this blog called Tell Me Why. He wrote this long 2-part blog on AI, and the argument that he made was that technology over a long period of time improves on an exponential scale, right? So what you said, we made a lot of progress in the 100 years from 1901 to 2000, right? And his argument is we made the same amount of technological progress in the first 14 years of the century, and that will keep on accelerating until we're making that same amount of progress in one day, 1 hour, etc., right? And then he takes a step further, which is, so we're on an exponential curve for technology improvement. But once we achieve AGI and superintelligence, that curve vastly, vastly accelerates, right? Because artificial intelligence can improve upon itself. There's no kind of, for the most part, there's no constraint on how much you can scale artificial intelligence, and if that's the case, you should be able to solve, any problem. You should be able to accelerate advancement very, very, very quickly, right? And I think because of that, and because of the pace of innovation and progress in artificial intelligence, Sam Altman just said that superintelligence is a few thousand days away, right? And it's, I don't have numbers on this, but it's truly astounding how quickly AI is scaling as well, right? So once we achieve superintelligence and scale within AI, who knows how quickly
Yeah.
scientific progress will accelerate.
Yeah, it's like R. Edmondson. Is that the Tell Me Why blogger's author's name? Something like that?
No, but I will look it up while we're talking, and I'll let you know, or I can look it up
Yeah, no, I mean, don't worry
right
about
now.
that. All right, yeah, if you want to just look it up, we can clip it out and clip it back in. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, so okay, let's talk about like artificial intelligence, super AI. Another article, I can't remember if you sent it to me or not, was they were doing the comparison of the intelligence of humans compared to AI versus primates, right? And they were using a staircase as an example to kind of elaborate the idea. And the idea was if monkeys or chimpanzees are on the fifth step of a staircase, or something similar, then humans would be, let's say, on the sixth step, right?
yeah,
That's the difference between our intelligence. And even if you're able to accelerate a monkey's ability to understand concepts,
yeah,
that's not necessarily going to get them from step 5 to step 6. There's a cognitive disconnect, or a cognitive delta that
yep,
just speed alone does not bridge that gap.
yeah,
But what they were saying is, so we'll get to a point where AI, right? And it's taken what, millions and millions of years for humans to get from step 5 to step 6, right? And we haven't
Yeah.
gotten from step 6 to step 7. So it's like it's a process and it's time consuming. But the idea was, okay, general intelligence AI will be at step 5. The
Yeah.
moment we get to super intelligence, super AI, it'll be at, let's say, step 6, 7, 8, potentially.
Yeah.
But once we get to that point, the AI is going to be intelligent enough that it can effectively do natural selection itself, like create programs, connect the programs, take the best part of the programs, and then in months and days and hours and minutes and seconds, they'll start increasing steps, right?
Yeah.
To a point
Yeah.
where humans won't be able to interact in a way where is meaningful for the AI, and concepts and solutions that the AI provides that seem easy and simple to the AI, it wouldn't even be able to explain it to us if it wanted to, unless obviously we modify humans so that humans are able to increase in intelligence. But a lot of the world's problems and a lot of issues can be quickly solved. But that
Yeah.
concept is both freaky but interesting, right? Like that's where
Yeah.
you get like the whole Terminator versus not Terminator thing. But it's like I'm curious. It's like because like and that I think the debate here becomes a lot of folks say, hey, general AI isn't that far off. Other people are saying no, it's still years far off.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're making progress, but even with the current LLM models, right? I think there was like a curve that they showed that like all the LLMs, when you break it down, are like the compute power are meeting a threshold that it's not actually going over. So it's like,
Yeah.
is it because of our computing power that's causing that, or is it just are the algorithms that we're using right now that are the issue? I mean, at a high level, like, do you think general intelligence is here sooner rather than later? What are your thoughts on like how to, like as Elon says, how to protect against the Terminator type
Yeah.
scenario?
So on this, so the name of the blog that I was talking about is Wait But Why. The author is Tim Urban.
Okay.
Highly recommend that author. And the concept that you were talking about, the monkey versus humans, Tim Urban writes about that, right? And the point he's making is that one, the pace at which AI will go past human intelligence is very, very fast, and we're underestimating that. And then the scale at which once AI achieves super intelligence is something we can't comprehend, right? So the example he gave was within living species, right? The intelligence difference between an ant and a monkey is quite high. Monkey to humans is actually not that high, but it's very minuscule, right, in terms of absolute intelligence within all living beings. But there are things that a baby can do or a child can do, simple math, that a monkey's not able to wrap their brains around that, right? Just within humans, the spread of intelligence is very, very low. But there's stuff that Einstein discovered that we have trouble wrapping our heads around. Like just absolutely I personally cannot comprehend, right?
Yep.
And that's a very, very small delta in terms of intelligence. And what Tim Urban says is, what if AI is just maybe 10% more intelligent than the most intelligent human being, right? The program will be able to think of things and accomplish things that we cannot wrap our heads around.
Yep.
But what if it's 10 times more intelligent, right? And once you provided scale and all the compute and energy in the world, who knows what is it capable of? Who knows what the program will discover or invent or what direction they'll take us in. The blog, I highly recommend reading Tim Urban on artificial intelligence. With regard to your second part of the question, I just don't know enough about where algorithms are today in terms of intelligence and where they're headed.
Yeah, I mean, it is exciting. Regardless, it's exciting because we're seeing it in real time, right? Like the advent of ChatGPT and all these LLMs. It's like even using GPT when it first came out versus now is exponentially different. It's like the quality that you're getting back is just sizably different. And it's interesting to see how. I mean, I personally think this is going to be changing the economic landscape. Like, there was an interesting interview with Sam Altman where he was talking about. I mean, like the example that he gave is like, let's imagine that there's two businesses. One is building a business on top of ChatGPT and one is not. But the business that's not building on top of ChatGPT, like it's creating a learning app, for
Yeah.
students, and the students that it can actually teach are up to 12th grade, and it's like optimized for that. But
Yep.
then let's say, and that's company A. Let's say company B built on ChatGPT. ChatGPT is not great right now. So
Yeah.
it's only capable of teaching students up to 6th grade.
Yeah.
It's like, well, here's the thing. It's like you spend all those resources to get it from 6 to 12, but the problem is the company that can teach the 6-year-olds, right, or the 6th graders, once ChatGPT 5.0 comes out, it'll be able to automatically teach 15th graders. So it's
Yeah.
like now the company that didn't build on top of ChatGPT or an LLM is going to struggle because they invested so much on that one component, whereas the other company was focusing and optimizing on other things, assuming that the LLMs are going to improve.
Yeah.
But like the concept here being like, yeah, I mean, that's going to change a lot of things. Now it's like half the things that we normally used to do, the coding, like the feature development, a lot of that stuff is going to be automated, right? So then our
Yeah.
thing is, all right, how do we bridge that gap? How do we market it? Like there's like a bunch of college kids now that are building what I believe is to be not the best apps, but they're building them
Yeah.
on like, LLMs, but they're like the geniuses in marketing. So they have
Yeah.
like TikTok viral campaigns, and they're making 10 to 20K MRR on like a bunch of apps that they're publishing on like what's trending right now. It's like
Yeah.
that seems to be the future, right? And it's like, how do we bridge that gap and leverage existing infrastructure to really meet the consumer demand?
And I would posit the future is more different than what you're saying. Right now, it is exactly what you're saying, right? Where we're taking rote work or mechanical work or work that's repetitive and vastly accelerating it using ChatGPT, right? So in the example that you said, developing apps where we know what the application would look like at a high level, give the requirements to ChatGPT, we get code out. We essentially, with a bit of debugging, we essentially have an app in our hands,
Yep.
right? Matter of minutes versus matter of days and weeks. And then the challenge for us is everything, the marketing, the scaling of the app, forming partnerships, right? Ensuring that the app meets the user's demands, right? And partly why AI cannot do that today is because there's no there's the intelligence aspect of it, right? Which is AI is just taking existing knowledge and rearranging it. There is the interface aspect of it, right? So ChatGPT is where ChatGPT will respond to us only if we interact with them. ChatGPT will not go out to an influencer and be like, "Hey, I need you to market this app," right? And I think both those problems will get solved. The
Yeah.
intelligence problem at some point it will have, based on what a lot of people are saying, scientists and otherwise, AI will achieve superintelligence.
Yep.
That's one. Two, AI will be in the form of agents that can go around the net and do stuff on their own, almost autonomously, right? And at some point, AI will be in physical robots as well. And if you have all of that, superintelligence plus no constraints on what you can and cannot do, the marketing problem that you're talking about or the partnerships problem that you're talking about, there's no reason why AI will not be able to take care of that, right? And will essentially do that better than us, right? And there's no reason why these programs will not be able to do kind of the high level thinking tasks and tasks that require social intelligence and emotional intelligence, right? No reason. And if that's the case, then the question is, what does the future look like for human beings? Where does this technology go? And it's both a very exciting proposition and a scary proposition.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's like Tesla is humanoid robots that are coming out. You're right. It's not going to be hard to implant or input an LLM or an AI in there that's, general super intelligence, whatever the technology is at the time. But that, like you said, that brings up a very interesting point, right? So it's like that again doesn't seem too far away. Like the humanoid robots are there. They can and like day by day they're getting better at like human level movements, right? Like
Yeah.
not falling over, doing jumps, doing flips. So then it comes to a point where and again it kind of seems like sci-fi-esque, but like now it doesn't. Like a real world one, a Matrix.
Yeah.
Like if we're in a post-scare society where robots are effectively doing everything that we need, maintaining infrastructure, like I don't know, mining asteroids, getting us raw material, farming, It's like, okay, so if that's the case, then all the work that humans need to do for sustenance effectively evaporates, right?
Yeah,
So then it's like, okay, I mean, and then I can see this going a couple routes. Like humans become fat and lazy, possible. But it's like
yeah,
when I say matrix, I'm not saying like robots have imprisoned us in like a matrix style environment. But let's say they start to create real worlds or like virtual worlds that are as real as the real world. It feels that way, right? And then you can go into your own pod and you can be like the main character of your fantasy. You can be Harry Potter, you can be Pug, you can be Cristiano Ronaldo. Like whatever you're interested in, you can be like, the F1 racing star. It's like
yeah,
at that point it's like and that life feels as real life. It's like you not only can you interact with humans virtually through those pods, but then you're also the main character of your own world. It's like it
yeah,
starts to one, it's not that far fetched now, but two, it starts to seem like well, a lot of people would be interested in that. Some might
yeah,
not, but it seems like a pretty, but I think that's not necessarily a good thing because then I feel like human innovation dwindles or dies.
yeah,
Because one of the biggest things that I think leads to human innovation is the fact that we have a shit ton of people that are engineers that have
yeah,
created all that we've created. That
yeah.
evaporates. Like I mean, like what's your take on that? How do you think that's gonna go?
Yeah, and I think we do end up in a world of abundance where there's no scarcity, but I also worry that we end up in a world where humans do not have a purpose,
Yeah,
or humans do not have a battle or fight or adversities to overcome, which is part of what makes life beautiful and accomplishments so sweet, right? I really worry. So using the example that you said, that you're in your virtual world and you're the king of your own world. You can be the best Formula One driver. You could be the best athlete, right? Whatever. But that's going to happen, right? It's like playing video game on
right.
easy mode or Mario Brothers with the star on, right? You're going to win, and that victory is a lot less sweeter than
Yeah,
if you beat Mario Brothers by your own. It's cheap high. It's a very cheap high. And going back to the purpose conversation, yeah, I don't know where it goes. Maybe the virtual world is, where it guarantees you victory, but you don't know that, and you go through a bunch of
fair.
adversities. Who knows?
But I mean, like even like everything that you said is spot on. It's like it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic because let's take greed and selfishness to like as examples, right? While those traits served an extremely valuable purpose 200,000 years ago when we were cavemen, right? It's like
Yeah,
your versus mine. Like if you steal my resources, probably I die and my tribe dies, right?
yep,
Because we had a significant scarcity of resources. So it's like being greedy, being aggressive, like that served a very significant purpose. It served whether you survive and like your ants like, and we're here because our ancestors were probably the most greedy, potentially the most aggressive in the environments that allowed them to thrive, where others that might have been less so, might have passed on or died because they weren't. So
yeah,
so it's like and yes, at times like that might not be as relevant in this society or like in a first world country because we have a lot of resources. But the problem is that those traits are a significant reason to what drives us, right?
yeah,
It's like why do you want to be rich? Why do you want to accomplish this? It's coming from some of these base traits that allowed us to succeed in the past. And you're exactly right. Like let's take it a step further. So like with CRISPR, with the advent of all this technology, it's like, does it get to a point where like they start to modify genes so some of those traits go away? It's like, yeah, it could cause less strife, less problems, but it also, I would say, takes away from what being a human is. Like, what part of the reason we thrived is because of this, right?
yeah,
And so you're right.
yeah.
If we don't have a purpose or if we don't have something that's motivating us or pushing us, then yeah, it's like you can easily become a waste, like where you don't really do much. And that's where I guess this argument becomes tricky. It's like, well, if you don't need to do much and you're genuinely enjoying life, yeah, maybe that is enough. But it's like the other side of that is, but that feels like it's going to cause stagnation. So like, do we want that? Like, do we
Yeah.
want to sit as AI does everything for us going forward? Yeah, we might make advancements, but it's because of AI. That then almost kind of feels like are we in charge or are we kind of subservient at that point, right?
Yeah.
It's like I
Yeah.
don't I don't know. Are we like kept dogs? Like and the AI is the master, or are we the master and the AI is doing stuff for us? But I don't like that's like a weird line and I don't know which side of that you would fall on.
I don't know. Part of it is I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows genuinely what the future holds, right? 10 years from now. Or and the future is just going to be so vastly, vastly, vastly different than anything we're used to. Yeah, so I don't know, right? We could end up in kind of a Terminator-like world where machines rule us. We could end up in a world where there's no scarcity and kind of like Wall-E in the Disney movie, right? Or it's possible none of the above happens. I genuinely don't know where we end up. The blog that I talked about earlier in the podcast by Tim Urban, Wait But Why, right? The way he ended the blog is by asking the question, is it going to be a good God or is it going to be a bad God? Right?
Interesting.
Where the premise or the conclusion he came to is that AI is just going to be extremely powerful. We don't know what direction we'll go in, and who knows? Yeah.
You know another interesting thing. So like I kind of nerd out on some sci-fi or science stuff, like and like where technology is going right now, and like like the Kardashev scale, like 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
etc. And one of the interesting things I ran across recently was like how the issue with the Fermi paradox, like why are we not seeing other races that like based on the fact that it's been 13, 14 billion years, like we should be seeing other races, and like what's the issue, like what potentially could be going on. And like obviously you have the whole timeline component. 13 billion years is a long time, so it's like races could come and go, and if you
Yeah.
have to not only be a race, but you have to be aligned on a time sign. And even
Yeah.
if you are aligned on a time sign with the vastness of space, like we're seeing like someone's planet maybe 10 billion years ago, 5 billion years ago versus now. So it's like even that race might be there, but like the light that's coming here wouldn't be actually providing that information. We'd be
Yep.
seeing something before. But this is the part that's interesting. Another interesting scale or another interesting thought was we always imagine in a lot of our like the Star Wars and the Star Treks that they're galaxy faring civilizations, right? They go from one solar system to another, and they expand. But they're like, that's one possibility, but a very real and arguably more economic and efficient model of expansion is if you take your society and you digitize it, and then you go to the outskirts of a black hole,
Yeah.
and you effectively take, I mean, for argument's sake, we'll say your servers or whatever it might be that's digitizing your entire race, and you're right at the outside skirts of the black hole and you're leveraging the energy that the black hole is generating, you effectively can become a society that can live forever digitally, right? As opposed, and the resources required are exponentially less, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, so
Yeah.
then there would be races and civilizations that are vastly advanced, but they're like, it doesn't make sense to go from one system to another. Let's digitize. And one of the big issues they were saying that this kind of tackles is that they're like, Earth can handle like many trillions of people, like from a land standpoint. It's
Yeah.
like, but those humans would generate so much heat that it would fry the planet, right? Again, if you digitize, and then like again, you might still need like a solar system worth of space to like for
Yeah.
all the people, but it's like space alone would provide some of the cooling, right? And then the solar system and all this other stuff starts to provide the energy, but again, the energy potentially needed to sustain a system like that still ridiculous, but probably exponentially less than a system like physical folks that are moving from place to place. So it seemed like it was just like a very interesting, I felt like, scenario for like a potential Fermi paradox, not solution, but rationale for why we might not be seeing stuff or seeing other
Yeah.
civilizations.
So essentially, everyone's in a matrix, right?
Yeah,
And essentially, what we need to live a good life or a happy life is mental stimulation.
yeah,
And if as long as the matrix can provide that, or digital world can provide that, right? Why live in the physical world? Yeah.
right. Well, and the other thing that was interesting about that is it's like when they're talking about, so it's like obviously like certain stars have different lifespans, right? But it's like a red
Yeah.
star, a red dwarf star is supposed to have the longest, I think, lifespan of the stars. Like let's say arguably like hundreds of billions, if not trillions of years. I think it was something along that range. But they're like with like what's it called, with black holes and Hawking radiation, right? It's like black holes will live for like, you know, multiple trillions beyond that, an exponential, an order of magnitude more than a red dwarf star. And then when
Yeah.
the last black holes, like, you know, dissipate due to Hawking radiation, then effectively the universe dies. But the interesting thing becomes, if you're digitized, then you don't give a shit if these stars are not there, because you just need the stars or the black holes for energy, right?
Yeah.
Whereas
yeah.
if you're like organic, then you need the star to actually survive, or you need some sort of environment that's conducive to organic life or even
Yeah.
mechanic life. So like the other thing then becomes, okay, so then individuals will have effectively the life cycle of the entire universe to live, and you're not dependent on these, you know, other structures, which also then
Yeah.
becomes a very, I guess, a very attractive reason to digitize, as opposed to become a galaxy like spanning civilization.
Yeah.
Again, all just interesting ideas, you know what I mean?
That's a very interesting concept, right? Maybe someone needs to tell Elon that we don't need to
Yeah.
be a galaxy-faring people.
Yeah,
We just
but we
need,
still need to be a solar system at least. You know
yeah,
what I mean? No, but I mean, like, you're right though. It's like it's quite interesting. And my argument would be, well, I think, and oftentimes their argument is, to be able to get to that level, you have to have the level that can allow you to obviously be galaxy faring, because you have to get to a
yep,
black hole, or you have, but
black hole.
but again, it's like, it does seem like that seems like a relatively interesting thought experiment. It's like I could
Yeah,
very well see, like, you know, someone or like a race thinking about this and being like, yeah, why the hell not live literally till the end of the universe, as opposed to, you know, potentially dealing with some nonsense. It's like, yeah, it seems like a reasonable argument.
Does a black hole keep on expanding, Sulav, do you know? Or
No, so from what I've read on black holes, it's like a black hole, what, let's say a black hole can expand. It actually has a maximum, I think, that it can expand. Like, and this is like my rudimentary understanding of black holes. But if
yeah,
there's nothing around the black hole for it to quote unquote eat,
okay,
it's
it
not
won't
going to expand, right? But even if it eats, there's a certain like, so like, you know how like I forget what they're called, but like a lot of black holes, oftentimes, especially like the super black holes, like in the middle of galaxies, every once in a while they'll start injecting a shit ton of energy,
yeah,
right? Like massive amounts of energy, and they're like the brightest things in the universe. And effectively, what that is, I think that's because like after like, either it's like after a black hole eats a certain amount, like something is spit out. Like, so like whatever it is
right,
spit, right? So like, but let's assume that there's nothing around the black hole. After a while, a black hole eventually will slowly start to become smaller and smaller because of Hawking radiation.
yeah,
So when they say a universe dies out, it's not that it expands or retracts. It's like eventually, like the black hole, I think it's because of like some sort of something with like conservation of energy or mass. It's like as the black hole starts to dissipate energy or Hawking radiation, eventually the black hole will stop or will not exist. So like, yeah, maybe it does eventually get smaller and smaller and smaller till it doesn't exist anymore. But
yeah,
that's supposed to take like many magnitudes of longer than you know, even the longest living star or anything like that.
gotcha,
I'm
gotcha.
also not explaining it that well, because like I listen to this stuff at night, kind of as like some white noise, because I like to. So like I listen to like half of it, I absorb maybe a percentage of it, but it's
Yeah,
all somewhat interesting to me.
just on this topic, right? Black holes. There is a documentary on Netflix. I'm forgetting its name. That follows different researchers studying the black hole,
Interesting.
right? Very interesting documentary. So one of the teams that follows is Stephen Hawking's team, as they're trying to understand the Hawking radiation and whether information is destroyed or conserved, right? There's a team that's trying to piece together a picture of a black hole, right? There's a team that's actually trying to listen to black holes as they kind of rotate around each other, right? So the documentary follows several different teams that are studying studying black holes from different perspectives, and trying to expand our knowledge. Very fascinating.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'll have to check that out. Do you know
Yeah,
by chance, the name of that?
I cannot recall it, but I do remember watching it on Netflix, and once again, I'll look it up and I'll mention it during our call.
Is it the Edge of All We Know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice, nice, nice.
That's it.
Cool. Yeah, man, yeah, it's like I think that stuff is quite fascinating, man. And even like some of the stuff, like, yeah, like what you're talking about, the two black holes meeting together. I think like what it's like CERN or someone was able to measure the gravity, the gravitational something, like I forget what it was called, but it's like
Yeah,
some of that stuff has come out recently. It's like it's quite interesting to understand the level at which some of these, how sensitive some of these measuring tools we have
the
to,
gravitational waves, right? From
yeah, the
created from
gravitational waves. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
Insane.
interesting, crazy stuff, man.
See, and that's what I'm talking about, right? Like, this is stuff that is so hard to comprehend for me.
Yeah, same.
Einstein predicted this, and all the equations that we worked on, right? They predicted these gravitational waves. In absolute intelligence terms, right? Einstein is not that much more intelligent than the average human being, and the average human being is not that much more intelligent than ape, right? But the level of cognitive abilities and you know what one person can think of and what the other person can understand can be so vastly different from these small steps. And sorry, going back to the AI conversation, right? If what if like a machine is 10 times smarter
Yeah.
than the smartest human being, right? What does that mean for us?
Well, and not just that, it's like it's 10 times smarter, but continually getting smarter because it knows how to continually improve itself. Like once it has the capability of improving its own like programming,
Yeah,
and then it's also in charge of a lot of the infrastructure. It can continue to expand its compute power, right? Just
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
It's an interesting, it's a very interesting dynamic. Well, but you know the other thing that's kind of interesting, it's like, and this is a tangent, but like, you're right. It's like Einstein is not that much smarter than, let's say on a purely comprehension standpoint. If you look at the delta between him and an average human, it might not be that much. Just like, but like he would be like the Michael Jordan of, let's say, physics, right?
Yeah,
And it's like
yeah,
Michael Jordan like was astronomically better than most people, but
yep,
if you look at his raw athletic ability compared to an average human, it is much better, but it's not that much better like in this like long, if you're looking at it holistically, like
yeah,
compared to like how fast a cheetah can run or how strong an
exactly.
ape is, it's like he's not that much different than a normal human, but that small delta makes such a large gap. But so
Yeah,
you're right. So then if we take AI, and that gap is not small, it's astronomical and continues to expand. It's like it'll be interesting, like unless the AI, and I'm sure the AI can come up with a solution to this. Like unless the AI is also has come up with a solution to vastly expanding human intelligence, which I think would be something we should, hopefully do. I mean, obviously, it would need to be, I'm assuming, however we're going to improve upon human intelligence, and I'm assuming it's going to be bringing in some sort of mechanical components to ourselves. It's like if we don't do that, it's going to be shocking how much we don't understand what the hell is going
yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah. We want to understand, you know, if it makes a decision or suggests something, we want to understand the reason for it. Now, I
Yeah.
wonder if Elon is working on the helping humans become more intelligent than we already are using Neuralink.
Yeah, and frankly, like I don't think that's that much of a stretch either, right? Like
Yeah,
using the neural links or using like I feel like yes, there's a difference between a human and a chimp, and it's not just compute power. But if you're able to make something like super intelligence, I don't think it's that much of a stretch to ask the super intelligence to come up with a solution to be able to improve your own cognitive ability. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So it's like hopefully that happens, but if not, it's a very, I mean, it's an exciting space to be in. Like, yeah, are we all gonna die? Hopefully not, but that doesn't change the fact that it is a very exciting time to see how everything is
yeah,
quickly adapting, right?
yeah. Whatever happens with AI, I do think, or the rate of progression in AI, I do think our lifespans are going to materially expand, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, so we may or may not be immortal, but I do think our life expectancy, which is around 80 years right now, will go up to north of 100 very
Without a
soon.
doubt. Yeah, I completely agree. And the interesting thing here is I was actually talking to someone about this recently. So not just that, it's like let's take first world countries out of it. Let's talk about emerging countries or emerging markets and frontier markets. Something as basic as the advent of telemedicine, right? It's like
Yeah,
we're already getting to a point where AI is probably as good, if not better, at identifying certain diseases than a medical professional, and like
Yep.
supplementing that decision making skill is going to be important, and it's going to quickly get to a point where maybe a doctor is just like ensuring that the last thing that is done is correct. But the reason why that becomes quite important is taking an AI and plastering it across every single location is
Yeah.
much more manageable than having a quality and a human that's trained in a quality manner, right? Like
Yeah.
having a U.S. doctor go to, maybe like the Boko Haram area of Nigeria is less
Yeah.
practical than sending a computer out there that can then do the exact same diagnostics,
Yeah.
right? And then it's like, and then once the, like I would say the first half of the battle is identifying and getting the right prognosis. Obviously, the second thing is then executing on that.
Yeah.
But again, I would argue then starting to automate like even medical procedures. It's like, yeah, it does seem like it's somewhat far away, but probably not that far away. So like getting to a point where getting accessibility to healthcare and quality healthcare across all of these areas that have a lack of resources, I think to your point will make it that the amount, the how long you live will not just be plus north of 100 for those in the U.S. in countries like the U.S., but sooner rather than later across the globe. And I think
Yeah.
that's quite interesting and quite exciting to see.
And taking that a step further, right? You can apply that to education as well. A child in any part of the country could have access to a super intelligent teacher who's just focused on one thing, the success of that child, and only one child, right? Not teaching a classroom with 20 other students. And that teacher can provide education starting from kindergarten or preschool all the way up to Stanford or MIT level PhD guidance, right? All of that in any part of the world. That's super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, like that's you're kind of touching on like the Star Trek Vulcan stuff. It's like you're absolutely right. Like training in a pod, but and that's another interesting thing. It's like a lot of folks that actually know about education, and I'm not one of them. Oftentimes say it's like having an education system that's like meant for manufacturing, where you have lined up desks and everyone moves the same pace, makes no sense. It's like I think you might have told me this or someone else, where like they did an experiment where they had a bunch of kids that were, let's say, 7 or 8 years old in a class, right? And they were progressing through, I think, like a math course, and they were all learning at the same speed.
Yeah.
But what would happen is any student that got like a 90 or 95% or more on a particular test was able to move on to the next section.
Yeah.
Any student that didn't wasn't able to. And what
Yeah.
happened is you saw the normal distribution of classes with A, B, C, D students but what they realized was the students that were perceived as not being as smart were told like they actually just didn't understand one or two concepts. And the
Yeah.
moment they actually understood those concepts, kept on understanding it, retook the test and got to 95, they quickly caught up to the A students.
Yeah.
So right, so it's like, yeah, why the hell are all students moving at the same pace? That makes no sense. It's like,
Yeah.
of course, it should be exactly what you're saying.
Sal Khan from the Khan Academy practice, right?
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
where and exactly what what you're saying, right? Students, they keep on progressing at a normal rate or a rate dictated by the school system, and if you have gaps in your foundational knowledge, you could be a perfectly smart student, but down the road, those gaps start to
Accumulate. Yeah.
accumulate. Yeah, right. And you become a B student, or you could be an A student, and you end up being a B student or C student. And if you are able to move at your own pace, even though it might be slow initially, you end up learning a lot more. Yeah. Yeah. So if you have personalized education, right, you move at your own pace, and you can also pursue topics and areas that you might be interested in. Go deeper in certain areas, not deeper in others. That's a fascinating future.
Yeah, man, and like touching on that a little bit more, and I think the interesting part about that is obviously like for example, the U.S. spends more per child than any other country in the world. It's like I think 14,000 some dollars per child per head, right? And it's like obviously the results are not there, and honestly, I don't know the right solution, but I do believe a lot of it is lack of resources. A lot of it is teachers not being paid. And it's like it's fine, whatever. Like it's not an easy solution to figure out. But I think one thing that can bridge this gap is, yeah, if you have universal access to, like you said, an AI that's going to really focus on an individual student at the student level and then allow them to grow.
Yeah.
Not only would that, I think, effectively, I think that's a solution that like I think would be hard pressed to say wouldn't work. But I think the part that then compounds to that is part of the reason, like it's like if you look at technological advancement and societal advancement from empire to empire, I think you see an exponential growth when universal education
Yeah.
becomes a thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like if everyone starts to study, then just that the compute power of that alone is going to make sure that you start to advance significantly more.
Yeah.
Now, if we take that and we say, think of how many geniuses there are, because like, dude, I think most humans probably are actually extremely, extremely adept at a very specific niche thing. But because of our inability to understand and identify what that is, they never maybe amount to what they could at in that particular field.
Yep.
And so like, and with that, so like, think about all the thousands, millions, billions of children that are in poverty or even not in poverty, but like don't have the right access. Like if you're able to identify, if these AI are able to properly train all, it's like that's an exponential increased number in the amount of humans that are properly educated, not
Yeah.
just going through the motions.
Yeah.
That means like obviously AI with even without the advent of AI, the level of advancement just from that alone would
Yeah.
be like it would compound, like there would be orders of magnitude of improvement.
Yeah.
So it'd be very interesting, and like, it would be good though not just in technology but in everything, right? Some people are going to be good at music, sales, art, whatever the hell that is, but if everyone is able to identify what that skill set is and what that passion is, it's like then we start to grow, and it's like it's very interesting to see how that also progresses.
And I mean, the question at that point is, aside from personal fulfillment, does it actually matter? Would it matter for the advancement of society?
You're right, it probably wouldn't. With the advent
Right?
of AI, probably not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to your point, I would argue, and so this is the other interesting thing. So it's like just how important the computer was in changing like the corporate lifestyle and the corporate environment and how people actually do work. AI is obviously changing that right now. But to your point, it's like not from an advancement standpoint, but I would argue from a fulfillment and purpose
Yeah.
standpoint.
Yeah.
If you've become an artist, like let's say you're a guitarist or you're like, let's say you write stories, right? It's like you then, if you, yeah, obviously you leverage the AI, but if you also have your own creative, like you can leverage your own creative talents and leverage the AI to kind of supplement that. It's like, yeah, people could read your thing. And it's like, that's kind of like, if I read a Kindle book right now, right? It's easier for me to get. But like buying a paperback book is nice sometimes, right? It's more
Yeah.
expensive. Books went from being super expensive to being very, very not expensive to now getting to be expensive again because of digitization, right? But
Yeah.
it's like I feel like you could say the same thing for content that's created. So it's like eventually we're going to have AI content that's going to be amazing. But then people are probably going to be wanting like niche human created content, right?
Yeah.
And so like that could still, to your point, serve the purpose of fulfillment, but it's
Yeah.
not a necessity, but like at
Yeah.
least that gives us purpose.
I was watching a documentary. So yeah, there's a concept of AI plus humans, right? One, and then there's a concept of down the road this piece of art or this piece of work, whatever it is, literary work or whatever, is created solely by humans, and that's why it's priced more, right? And you value it a bit more. I was watching a documentary just recently where there's this company that's taking blocks of marble and using robots to carve out statues, right? What Michelangelo and others would do in months, the machine is doing it in robots. Controversial, right? And there were people on both sides of the argument whether machines should be involved in building out statues. But one thing that came across was it took away the carving part, which is a very technical skill, away from the artists. And some of the artists were focused purely on design. And because of that, some of the designs that they were creating were actually quite unique. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. Like you're saying, it's like, again, taking an extreme example. It's like, let's say there's someone that's unbelievably talented, extremely artistic, but for some reason has some sort of motor skill challenge. It's like having an AI that can supplement his skill, his vision. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
obviously there's an artistry that comes from actually carving, but there's also an
Yeah.
artistry that comes from like the creative component of designing it. And like, I'm not that creative. So it's like, I can appreciate that. It's something that I can't do. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I think there's always going to be naysayers, but I think the interesting thing is with this, there's going to come, again, accessibility increases, and the different type of art forms are going to be suited for certain people that want it, right? Some people are not going to want AI created, but human supplemented. Some people are not going to mind. And I feel like, great, who cares? It's like, as
Yeah.
long as someone's enjoying what they're doing, there's going to be someone else who probably appreciates it. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting.
For sure. Just pause over here for a
Yeah.
second. Question for you. Are we going too much into AI?
No, not at all. So it's like, dude,
Okay.
this is exactly like, again, my vision is the Joe Rogan podcast, right?
Okay.
So it's like, I had a bunch of things I was going to talk to you about, like work, startups, but it's like, it doesn't matter. This is more organic. And frankly, this is probably more interesting than just hearing about you or
Okay.
just hearing about me, right?
I
And like,
take offense with that.
well, it was meant to be a little bit. Well, let me have my AI talk to you.
Okay.
No, but like effectively, like, and that's the reason, part of the reason I wanted you on the podcast, right? You're extremely well read, and like this conversation, I felt has been like extremely engaging. Like we're
Yeah.
taking topics that I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing about, and you're condensing it in a way that's like very easy to understand, and I think quite interesting. And I think
Okay.
you're an idiot, and so like I'm impressed now. No, but like no, but it's like that's the thing. So it's like, again, I had a list of stuff that we will talk about if we need to. But
Okay.
it's like the reason why I'm not going into it, 'cause I think this conversation is more interesting.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
You know what I mean? So that's why it's like, yeah, and that's why I felt like this will be a good conversation. I do it all the time. Every time we talk, we always go into tangents, but the tangents I think are interesting, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, we have a list of stuff that we can talk about, but why talk about that? Because one, not only do I think this is more interesting, but I do think a lot of people are probably interested in this right now
Yeah.
because AI is huge right now. It's like it's everywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But let me see what like yeah. So like some of the stuff I was gonna talk to you about was like your startup experience, like. But actually, we'll jump into this. I'll just be like, let's switch gears. So we'll talk like maybe 10, 15 more minutes, and then we can close it out.
Okay.
So Sonny, yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. I think we've gone kind of into the weeds of AI, which is always fun because I think you know it's a hot topic and honestly very very relevant at this point. One of the things that's kind of interesting with this is you've got a very interesting career trajectory, right? You've been an engineer, you've been a consultant, you've been an iBanker, now you're in the startup scene. I kind of want to focus on the startup experience a little bit, but at a high level, if you can kind of walk us through that journey. Let's go with that first. First, walk us through that journey that got to where you are here, and then I have a few questions specifically within the startup space for you.
Yeah. So my career journey has been, I wanted to be a professor and a researcher in nanotechnology, right? Once I got to college, there are two things I realized. One is there was a scientist named Richard Smalley, Nobel laureate. He's passed away. He argued that what Eric Drexler claimed, nanorobots, is actually not possible, physically possible, right? And the other realization was that science itself is a very, very narrow field. If you want to be good at it, and if you want to be a scientist, you're focused on a very, very narrow field for your entire career, right? That's something I didn't find exciting, and something I did not want to do for all my career. So I went into consulting. Went into professional services, right? Consulting. I made the switch to iBanking after that. I enjoyed investment banking. I enjoyed the thought process around investment banking, right? Valuation, how do you maximize the value of a company, who could be potential acquirers, et cetera, right? And what do the dynamics look like when these companies combine? I did not enjoy the transactional nature of investment banking, right? So you're there only for a deal. And once a deal happens, you collect a fee and you leave, right? So I went back into consulting. I joined this firm, which their mantra was, we help companies, clients win in both customer markets, i.e. Help you take a greater share of the profit pools that exist, and also the capital markets, i.e. would help you deliver outsized shareholder returns, right? So I joined that firm because it had elements of banking, it had elements of consulting, and elements of building long-lasting relationships with the clients. More recently, I switched, because of the massive wave in AI, I joined an India-based, Singapore-headquartered, AI-focused, AI-enabled solution development company that was commercializing technology in the States. was working there. While working there, realized that there's a gap in the market in terms of software that provides resiliency to company supply chains, right? And when we realized that there's a gap in this market, my mentor and co-founder in the company, him and I, we left and we founded this SaaS startup, right? And we're in very, very, very early stages that aims to build resiliency into corporate supply chains at a fraction of a cost of what it would normally take.
And
I think it's the strategic thinking, both banking and consulting. Actually, one thing that they taught me is, and it's something that I think the general public does not normally appreciate, is that the purpose of a corporation or a company is to deliver value to the shareholders, right? And the purpose of managers is to understand and develop a plan on how to capture the value and deliver it to the shareholders, right? That's a concept that I really appreciate from my investment banking days and also from my consulting days.
makes sense. And then you and I have talked about this a bit, but let's talk startups, right? So you've
Yeah.
done prior to the one that you're doing right now that you've co-founded, you've done two of them, the one in healthcare, one in AI. Both didn't work out, but you called them great learning experiences, right? Like tell me about the shit that went wrong and like what you learned from it and how you feel like it's really set you up to succeed now because you seem to be thriving now.
Yeah. So the healthcare startup I did was building on multi-center longevity centers. Over there, I mean, I won't go into too much detail about that, right? But what happened was, I think I was betrayed by my partner, and there was a falling out, and it didn't work out. My biggest learning from that was very, very important to choose your partners wisely, someone you trust and someone you respect, right? And then it's important to have very clear expectations of each other and then codify that in some manner, whether it's just a piece of email, a piece of paper, an email, or in some cases that it's a legal document, right? Legal agreement. The AI startup, we were gaining traction, right? And we were gaining very good traction within the customers and the customers in the United States in bringing this AI technology and commercializing it with some of the very well-known brands in the States, right? And there were some challenges with the mothership in India and Singapore, because of which the company was not going in the right direction, right? But otherwise, positive experience. We saw the need for that technology. Yeah,
Yep, similar experience, and not just me. It's like most of the folks that I know that are founders. It's like I think when you're young and or I wouldn't even say young in the corporate world or transitioning, it's like you're somewhat naive in this because you take things for
yeah,
granted. Because oftentimes you're surrounded by people that are very self-motivated that just get shit done. I think when you go into the startup world, you realize it's like, yeah, like you said, the partners that you work with are arguably like Khosla even talks about this, I think, with Sam Altman. It's like
yeah,
he's like, you should probably keep 15% of the equity yourself, and the rest should be for employees that you bring on. And it's
yeah,
like it seems very different than what a lot of people. He's like, and that's the reason why Sun did really well for him, because
yeah,
like they were he only kept a small amount and they gave the rest to the employees, and they like that company has done phenomenal, right? And so like the idea is you need to surround yourself with the right people because like dude, your business is your people, and
yeah,
especially in the beginning. And second, you're right. It's like you kind of got to treat this, I would say, it's like if you're going like it's kind of like couples therapy. Like you don't go to therapy when it's too late because you guys are already combative and it's kind of like an argument of who's right, who's wrong. I want to win. You
yeah,
want to go proactively before you even have an issue so that you never get to a point where it's so combative that you're not listening to each other.
yeah.
Like you got to codify. You got to codify when you're happy because that'll just keep people honest.
Yep.
But again, we all learn after we get burned. I know I only learned after I got burned, but then it's
Yeah.
like I learned that well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And for the listeners, right? You're the one who kind of after those experiences hammered it into me that codify any agreement that you have, right? The person that you're working with can be a fantastic person, but when things get tough, you want an agreement to fall back on, almost like a prenup, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, man. And it just but again, I think the nice thing is like most people, I think most successful founders or many successful founders, you got to go through some of that learning. It's like you tell a kid not to touch a stove oftentimes till he burns himself. Obviously minor, hopefully minor, very, very minor. It's like
Yeah.
that's when the kid's like, oh, that hurts. I don't want to experience that pain anymore. And it's like it was the
Yep.
same for all of us. And but again, it's like it's very good to learn that early on. And then, I think it makes it so that you're able to, work in creative and productive environments down the road. And you also know how to create those environments because you know what wasn't productive for you. And again, the other thing to that is every environment isn't great for everyone, but you want to surround yourself with people that work like you. And so
Yeah.
whatever that might be, you create that environment, and then you hopefully attract and have folks like that gravitate towards you. Like that's the
Yep.
idea in my mind, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So then let's talk about the current startup. Obviously, you don't have to get into the specifics of it, but it would be nice to kind
Yeah.
of, because I think the interesting thing about your story is like, well, it's common, the ups and downs, but I think the work that you put in up front, and like some of it was like you grinded, which was great, and you learned a ton. And that kind of led you to, it's like, because when people say it was luck, you were in the right place at the right time, it's like that's often not the case. You're often in the right place at the right time because you're grinding. Otherwise, you wouldn't be at the right place at the right time, right? So kind
Yep.
of walk us through your story and your journey and like where you're at right now.
Yeah. The last company we were working for, my partner and mentor and I, we noticed the need for a solution that builds resiliency into supply chains because there have been a lot of shocks lately. The weather related shocks and that ship that got stuck in Suez Canal, for example, right? That caused ripple effects through the markets. We realize there's a need to build resiliency into supply chains. Companies are working on it. But it requires a lot of effort and a lot of money, right? So companies to build resiliency, they need to buy just in stock, have multiple different suppliers for the same components, right? Multi-sourcing, et cetera. So it's an expensive proposition to build resiliency. We came to the realization that you can build it using software and some of the AI capabilities that are just becoming available right now. After we came to that realization, we spoke to multiple different industry experts. So people who are chief supply chain officers at large companies, people who ran S&OP and procurement processes at companies. We spoke to them. We validated the idea and believe that there's a need for this company, for this software. And we're in the process of we're talking to several different brands in the U.S. for them to be our first kind of foundational customer with whom we'll build out the product in conjunction. Early days, very very early days, exciting times, slightly nerve-wracking times as well, and those things go hand in hand: excitement and nervousness, right? But yeah, that's where we're at.
Dude, that's awesome. It's like, yeah, and it is kind of interesting. Like after, like I said, like after the grind, I think it's very rewarding because eventually, like, dude, if you grind, you will eventually have that aha moment where you're like, fuck,
Yeah,
this is a huge gap, huge opportunity. Let's capture it. And it's like, I feel like there's very few things that are more rewarding than
yeah,
after the grind, right? Because it's like, it is an up and down. It's a roller coaster of emotions. And then you're like, finally, fuck, after all this hard work, I think we've
yeah,
got something here. So
yeah,
that's super
yeah.
exciting. So I mean, like kind of like to round things off, man, assume you had an unlimited budget, right? What's one thing you would want to build right now? I'm taking this outside of the current startup. And it can be anything science related, passion related. Like what's something that you would want to build that you think either you would be excited to build because you would be like an Elon type situation, or it's just a huge passion for you, like a cricket or a Formula One team. Like
Yeah.
what's that one thing you would do?
I mean, there are several things, right? There's a business context. There's kind of fun context. There's a philanthropy aspect as well. On the business side, I think it's AI agents, right? That market is there's so much potential over there, and I believe our startup is going to go down that path at some point in time. On the fun side of things, right? If I had unlimited money, unlimited resources, I would buy a sports team, probably a Formula One team. How cool would that be?
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Would you get on the
Yes,
racetrack with them? You know what I mean?
yeah. Part of the agreement of buying
Right?
the team would be that they design a car for me, and I can write it. But from what I understand, if you're not a trained driver, the car is so physically demanding, and the drive is so physically demanding that most people cannot do more than one lap, right?
Yeah. Yeah, your neck, I've heard like the neck workouts that they do, so like from the G forces is just brutal.
Yeah, the neck, and then also the steering, and then actually,
Yeah.
from what I've heard, what I've read, the braking. It takes a lot of
Oh
effort.
yeah. Well, at least it'll get you in shape, huh? You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
So I think the steps are acquire unlimited amount of resources,
Step one.
buy an F1 team, and then get in shape.
It's a good
And
process, man.
and then on the philanthropic side of things, it's eliminating homelessness, right? I think that is a problem that's extremely prevalent in a country with the largest economy in the world, right? And on a per capita basis, we're not that far behind from the pole position. Yet there's
Yep.
a lot of homelessness in the states, right? Especially in the large cities. There's a problem that has well-defined boundary conditions, right? And we have more than enough resources to solve it. And I feel like we as a society have not gone about the right way to solve this problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Well, so no, this has been awesome. Honestly, your
Yeah.
story's got so many layers to it. I think a lot of people listening will take away something meaningful. Before we wrap up, where can people follow you or connect with you if they want to learn more about what you're working on?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, Dhaval Garg, DHAVALGARG, and then I'm on Twitter as well.
Perfect, man. So again, thanks for coming on the show. And to everyone tuning in, thank you for listening to the Vital Voices experience. And don't forget to subscribe and share this episode. Catch you guys next time. Thanks.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Yeah, of course, man.